German Shepherd was caged in a zoo as an exotic dog. What baby did next left everyone in tears. The story you're about to listen will shake you to your core. What this little boy did next left the whole city in tears. Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the Anderson family as they made their way through the crowded paths of Pineville City Zoo. James and Sarah Anderson had promised their children, 5-year-old Ethan and 7-year-old Emma, a day of adventure to break the monotony of their week-long vacation at Grandma's house. The excitement in the air was palpable as the children darted from exhibit to exhibit, their faces lighting up with wonder at each new animal they encountered. "Mommy, look at the tigers!" Emma squealed, pressing her face against the glass barrier. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she jumped up and down. "They're so big!" Sarah smiled, adjusting her sun hat as she peered at the magnificent striped cats lounging in the artificial habitat. "They are beautiful, aren't they?" James checked the zoo map, his brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of the winding paths. "The elephant exhibit should be just around this corner," he said, folding the map with practiced precision. "Ethan was really looking forward to seeing those, weren't you, buddy?" But Ethan wasn't listening. The usually chatty 5-year-old had gone oddly quiet, his small body frozen in place as if rooted to the concrete path. His gaze was fixed on something across the way, an exhibit that most visitors seemed to be passing by without a second glance. "Ethan?" Sarah called, her voice tinged with concern. "Honey, what's wrong?" The boy didn't respond. His eyes, wide and unblinking, remained locked on the distant enclosure. Without warning, he broke into a run, his tiny legs carrying him through the crowd with surprising speed. "Ethan, stop right now!" James shouted, starting after his son with Sarah and Emma following close behind. They caught up to him, standing before a modest glass enclosure, tucked between the more popular exhibits. A small plaque on the wall read, "Rare Himalayan Mountain Hound, recently acquired." Inside was what appeared to be a German Shepherd, but with an unusual silver-gray coat that might have seemed exotic to the untrained eye. The dog lay on its side, its ribs clearly visible beneath its dull fur. A water bowl, barely touched, sat in the corner of the sparse enclosure. "Look at him," Ethan whispered, his palms pressed flat against the glass. "He's so sad." Sarah knelt beside her son, ready to usher him along to the more exciting exhibits. "It's just a dog, sweetie. We have lots of dogs back home in our neighborhood. Don't you want to see the elephants?" But Ethan shook his head vehemently, his eyes never leaving the dog. "His name is Ghost," he said with such certainty that it gave his parents pause. James laughed nervously. "Buddy, there's no way you could know that. It doesn't even say his name on the—" "He told me," Ethan interrupted, his voice soft but unwavering. "He's talking to me right now." Emma rolled her eyes, the way only a 7-year-old sister could. "Dogs can't talk, stupid." "Emma," Sarah warned before turning back to her younger child. "Honey, I know you have a big imagination, but—" "He says he doesn't belong here," Ethan continued, as if he hadn't heard his mother. "He says the mean man hurts him when nobody's looking." An uncomfortable silence fell over the family. James and Sarah exchanged worried glances as they observed their son. Unlike his usual pretend play, there was something different about Ethan's behavior now, a seriousness, an intensity that seemed beyond his years. Inside the enclosure, the dog, which had been lying motionless, suddenly lifted its head. Its amber eyes fixed directly on Ethan, and in a movement that sent chills down Sarah's spine, it rose to its feet and approached the glass precisely where the boy stood. While other visitors continued to walk past without sparing the exhibit a second glance, the dog pressed its nose against the glass directly opposite Ethan's small hand. A low whine escaped its throat, the first sound they had heard from the animal. "See?" Ethan whispered, a tear sliding down his cheek. "Ghost is scared. He says he needs help." James cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative despite the unease creeping up his spine. "That's enough, Ethan. It's probably just hungry or wants attention. Let's go see those elephants now." He reached for his son's shoulder, but Ethan shrugged away from his touch, remaining planted in front of the enclosure. "He's afraid of the night man," the boy said, his voice dropping even lower. "The man with the needle and the knife." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Ethan, that's not a nice thing to say. Where did you hear something like that?" "Ghost told me," Ethan insisted, fresh tears welling in his eyes. "He shows me pictures in my head." A zoo employee in a khaki uniform approached, a forced smile on his face. "Is everything all right here? This exhibit doesn't usually get much attention." James nodded quickly, eager to move on. "Yes, fine. My son just got a little fascinated with your rare hound there." The employee's smile never reached his eyes. "Ah, yes. Our Himalayan mountain hound. Quite a specimen. Very rare. Only a handful in captivity worldwide." Sarah, ever observant, noticed how the man's gaze darted nervously to Ethan, who was still whispering to the dog through the glass. "Is it healthy?" she asked hesitantly. "It looks rather thin." "Acclimation period," the employee replied too quickly. "These exotic breeds often take time to adjust to new environments and diets. Nothing to worry about. The zoo director personally oversees its care." As he spoke, the dog began to pace anxiously in front of the glass, its eyes never leaving Ethan's face. There was something unnervingly deliberate about its movements, almost as if it were trying to communicate. "Let me tell you," the employee continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality, "these Himalayan hounds are incredibly intelligent, used by Tibetan monks for centuries to guard their most sacred temples. Very valuable animals." But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. She was watching her son, who had begun to tremble as he stared at the dog. Tears streamed freely down his face now. "Ghost says the man is coming," Ethan sobbed suddenly. "He says he's gonna hurt him again tonight." The employee's smile faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. "Kids and their imaginations, right? Though I don't recall our signage mentioning the animal's name." He checked his watch with exaggerated interest. "The zoo will be closing in about 30 minutes. You might want to hurry if you still want to see the elephants." With that, he turned and walked briskly away, speaking quietly into a radio clipped to his shoulder. "We should go," James said firmly, taking Ethan by the hand. "We've wasted enough time here." But as they tried to lead him away, Ethan began to scream, a raw, desperate sound that turned heads throughout the nearby exhibits. "No! We can't leave him! The Nightman is going to hurt Ghost! Please, Daddy, please!" His small body contorted with such genuine anguish that several passers-by stopped to stare. James lifted his son into his arms, holding him tightly as Ethan continued to scream and reach back toward the enclosure. The dog, now fully alert, was barking and pawing at the glass, its behavior as distressed as the child's. "Shh, it's okay, buddy," James murmured, stroking his son's back as they walked away. "It's just a dog. It's going to be fine." But Ethan's screams only intensified. "He's scared of the dark. He's scared of the needles. Don't leave him there. Ghost says they're going to take him away forever." By the time they reached the zoo exit, Ethan had cried himself into exhaustion, his small body hiccuping with the aftermath of his sobs as he slumped against his father's shoulder. The family made their way to the parking lot in uncomfortable silence, the joy of their day thoroughly shattered. Later that evening, in the safety of Grandma's guest bedroom, Sarah tucked an unusually subdued Ethan into bed. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, his typically rosy cheeks pale. "Try to get some sleep, sweetie," she whispered, brushing his dark hair from his forehead. "Tomorrow we'll go to the water park, just like we planned. It'll be fun." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with a wisdom that unsettled her. "Ghost can't sleep," he said quietly. "He's too scared." Sarah sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, honey, I know you felt a connection with that dog today, but it's being taken care of by professionals. You need to let this go." "He's not a mountain dog," Ethan insisted. "Ghost says he used to have a family and a yard to play in. Then the bad people took him." "It's time to stop this, Ethan," Sarah said more firmly. "No more talk about the dog talking to you. Dogs don't talk, and they don't send pictures to your head. Now, get some sleep." She kissed his forehead and turned out the light, leaving a small night light glowing in the corner of the room. At the door, she paused, watching as her son stared up at the ceiling, his small face solemn in the dim light. "Mommy," he called as she began to close the door. "Yes, sweetie." "Ghost is crying." Sarah closed the door with a soft click, leaning against it for a moment as she tried to make sense of her son's bizarre behavior. Children his age often had imaginary friends, but this felt different. The intensity of his reaction, the specificity of his claims, it all felt unsettlingly real. In the living room, she found James and her mother-in-law, Eleanor, speaking in hushed tones. "He finally asleep?" James asked, looking up from his coffee. Sarah shook her head. "Not yet, but hopefully soon. He's still talking about that dog." Eleanor, A retired elementary school teacher with 40 years of experience with children frowned thoughtfully. You know, sometimes children pick up on things adults miss. Their perception isn't clouded by logic and experience the way ours is. Mom, please, James sighed. Don't encourage this. It was just a dog in a zoo exhibit that caught his attention. A malnourished dog, Sarah corrected, being passed off as some exotic breed. Did you see its ribs? And the way that employee got nervous when Ethan started talking? Something felt off about the whole thing. James ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. What are you suggesting? That the zoo is mistreating animals? That they're scamming people? That's a serious accusation, Sarah. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Sarah replied defensively. I'm just saying it didn't feel right, and Ethan's reaction was extreme. He's 5, James countered. 5-year-olds have meltdowns all the time. Remember the tantrum he threw last month when we wouldn't buy him that toy robot? Eleanor placed a calming hand on her son's arm. True, but this seemed different, didn't it? The things he was saying about the nightman and needles. Where would he even get ideas like that? Before either parent could respond, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the guest bedroom. They rushed to find Ethan sitting bolt upright in bed, his face contorted in terror, his small body drenched in sweat. They're hurting him, he wailed as Sarah gathered him into her arms. They're putting the needle in him. Ghost is screaming, but nobody can hear him. Shh, it was just a nightmare, Sarah soothed, rocking him gently. Just a bad dream. But Ethan shook his head violently. Not a dream. It's happening right now. Ghost is showing me. Look! He thrust his arm toward them, and in the dim light of the night lamp, they could see angry red scratches running from his wrist to his elbow, scratches that hadn't been there when Sarah tucked him in. My God, Eleanor gasped. James, turn on the light. In the harsh glare of the overhead light, the scratches were even more pronounced. 3 distinct lines, too straight to be self-inflicted, too fresh to have gone unnoticed earlier. How did this happen? James demanded, examining his son's arm carefully. Ethan, did you do this to yourself? Ghost did it, Ethan sobbed. He's trying to show me where they hurt him. He needs us to help him. The adults exchanged alarmed glances. I'm calling Dr. Matthews, Eleanor said decisively, referring to the family pediatrician, who was an old friend. This isn't normal. While Eleanor made the call and James inspected the room for anything Ethan might have scratched himself with, Sarah sat with her son, trying to calm his hysterical crying. Ghost says we need to hurry, Ethan hiccuped between sobs. The man with the cold eyes is going to sell him to the fighting people tomorrow. What fighting people? Sarah asked, unable to help herself. The ones who make dogs fight until they die, Ethan whispered, his eyes wide and frightened. Ghost showed me pictures. It's so scary, Mommy. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. How could her 5-year-old possibly know about dogfighting? They were careful about what he watched on television, and it certainly wasn't a topic discussed in their home. Dr. Matthews arrived 30 minutes later, his gray hair disheveled, clearly having been roused from sleep. After examining Ethan and finding no physical cause for his distress or explanation for the scratches, he took Sarah and James aside. Physically, he's fine, the doctor said quietly, but I'm concerned about this sudden fixation and the self-harm. Has he been exposed to any traumatic events recently? Changes in routine? New medications? Both parents shook their heads. Our life is painfully normal, Doc, James said. The most exciting thing we've done all year is this trip to visit Mom. Dr. Matthews nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes children his age go through phases of extreme empathy. They become overwhelmed by the suffering they perceive in the world, whether real or imagined. It's not uncommon, especially in highly sensitive children like Ethan. But the scratches, Sarah persisted. He couldn't have done that to himself, could he? Children in distress can do surprising things, the doctor replied carefully. The mind is powerful, and at his age the line between reality and imagination is often blurred. He prescribed a mild sedative to help Ethan sleep, and suggested they make an appointment with a child psychologist when they returned home. As he prepared to leave, Ethan called out to him from the bed. Dr. Matthews, do you know about the zoo? The doctor approached the bed with a gentle smile. Which zoo is that, Ethan? Pineville Zoo, the boy replied softly. The one with Ghost. Dr. Matthews' smile faltered slightly. Ah, yes. I've taken my grandchildren there many times. Do you know the man with the cold eyes? The zoo director? The doctor glanced at James and Sarah before responding. I believe I've met him at community events. Mr. Reynolds, isn't it? No, Ethan said, his voice suddenly clearer. His name is Victor Blackwood. Ghost showed me his name tag. The color drained from Dr. Matthews' face. Victor Blackwood? Are you sure that's the name you saw, son? Ethan nodded solemnly. Ghost says he used to work at another zoo, but they made him leave because he was mean to the animals. Now he pretends dogs are special, so he can sell them to bad people. Sarah noticed the doctor's hand trembling slightly as he closed his medical bag. Dr. Matthews, is something wrong? The doctor seemed to consider his words carefully before speaking. The name, Victor Blackwood. It was in the news a few years back. There was a scandal at West River Wildlife Park. Allegations of animal mistreatment and illegal trafficking. The director there was forced to resign, but charges were never filed due to lack of evidence. A heavy silence fell over the room. And his name was Victor Blackwood? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Matthews nodded grimly. It was. I remember because my daughter works in animal conservation and was outraged when he wasn't prosecuted. He looked at Ethan with newfound concern. But there's no way Ethan could know that name unless... Unless what? Sarah prompted. Unless he heard it somewhere, the doctor finished, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by his own explanation. Listen, I don't want to alarm you, but if what Ethan is saying has any basis in reality, it might be worth looking into. You can't seriously be suggesting, James began. I'm not suggesting anything, Dr. Matthews interrupted. I'm a man of science, but in 40 years of practice, I've seen things I can't explain. Children sometimes know things they shouldn't possibly know. He handed Sarah his card. Call me tomorrow, regardless of what you decide to do. After the doctor left, James, Sarah, and Eleanor gathered in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones while Ethan finally slept under the influence of the sedative. This is insane, James insisted, pacing the floor. We're not seriously considering that our 5-year-old is psychically communicating with a dog, are we? Of course not, Sarah replied, though her voice lacked conviction. But how do you explain him knowing the director's name, or those scratches appearing out of nowhere? Eleanor, who had been quietly making tea, finally spoke up. When my mother was a girl in Ireland, there was a child in her village who could sense when animals were in distress. They called him the Whisper Boy. People would bring their sick livestock to him, and he would tell them what was wrong. Mom, please, James groaned. Folktales aren't helping right now. It's not a folktale, Eleanor said firmly. It was a real child with a real gift. My mother saw it with her own eyes. Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. Even if we entertain this possibility, what are we supposed to do? Break into the zoo and steal a dog based on our son's visions? James slammed his hand on the counter. This is ridiculous. We are not entertaining this. Tomorrow we're going to the water park as planned, and that's the end of it. But as they argued, none of them noticed the small figure standing in the hallway, listening to every word. Ethan, having fought through the sedative's effects, slipped back to his room and closed the door silently behind him. With movements far more deliberate than any 5-year-old should possess, he began to draw. Page after page filled with detailed sketches. The zoo's back areas, security cameras, guard schedules. A map of underground corridors. A man with cold eyes injecting something into a dog's neck. Cages filled with different breeds, all labeled as exotic species. And most disturbing of all, a calendar with tomorrow's date circled in red, the words Transport Night scrawled across it in a child's unsteady hand. When the house finally fell silent and the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Ethan placed his drawings in a neat pile beside his bed. He crawled under the covers and closed his eyes, but not to sleep. In his mind, he could see Ghost, huddled in his cage, trembling as the night guard made his rounds. "I'll help you," Ethan whispered into the darkness. "I promise." Miles away, in the silent, shadowy confines of the Pineville Zoo, a silver-gray German shepherd lifted his head suddenly, as if listening to a voice no one else could hear. For just a moment, the fear in his amber eyes gave way to something else, a flicker of hope. Morning arrived with a tension that hung in the air like the gathering clouds outside. Sarah woke to find James already dressed and on the phone, his voice hushed but urgent. "Yes, that's right," he was saying. "Victor Blackwood. I just want to confirm if he's the current director at Pineville Zoo. He paused, listening. I see. And there's no way to reach him directly? No message. Thank you. Sarah sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. What are you doing? James set the phone down with a sigh. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Dr. Matthews said, about that name Ethan mentioned. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Victor Blackwood is indeed the director of Pineville Zoo, has been for the past 18 months. A chill ran through Sarah despite the warm morning air. That doesn't prove anything. Ethan could have heard the name somewhere. Where, Sarah? We've never been to this zoo before yesterday. We don't know anyone in Pineville except my mother. How would Ethan know the director's name, much less his history at another zoo? Before Sarah could respond, Emma burst into the room, her eyes wide with alarm. Mommy! Daddy! Come quick! There's something wrong with Ethan! They rushed to the guest bedroom to find Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dozens of detailed drawings. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth in shock. He's been like this since I found him an hour ago, she whispered. He won't speak, won't even look at me, just keeps drawing. Ethan's small hand moved across the paper with unwavering precision, sketching what appeared to be a detailed floor plan. His eyes had a distant, glassy quality, as if he were seeing something far beyond the walls of the bedroom. Ethan? Sarah approached slowly, kneeling beside her son. Honey, can you hear me? No response, just the steady movement of pencil on paper. James picked up one of the completed drawings, a remarkably detailed sketch of a man in a lab coat, injecting something into a caged dog. The man's face was rendered with unsettling accuracy, his eyes indeed cold and calculating, just as Ethan had described. This is impossible, James muttered, sifting through the drawings. Look at this. It's like architectural blueprints of the zoo, back hallways, security camera placements, staff schedules. How could he possibly know any of this? Sarah picked up another drawing that made her blood run cold, a sketch of a loading dock with several vans, men loading cages into them. In one cage, clearly visible, was the silver-gray German Shepherd. The date written at the top of the page was today's. James, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I think we need to take this seriously. You can't honestly believe... Look at these, Sarah thrust the drawings at him. Our 5-year-old son did not make these up. He couldn't possibly know these details. Something is happening to him, and whatever it is, it's connected to that dog at the zoo. Ethan suddenly dropped his pencil, his head snapping up as if pulled by an invisible string. His eyes focused for the first time that morning, fixing on his parents with an intensity that made them step back. They're moving the schedule up, he said, his voice eerily calm. They know someone was asking questions about Mr. Blackwood. Ghost says we need to go now, right now. Eleanor moved to the bed, sitting down heavily. James, Sarah, I don't know what's happening here, but I've never seen anything like this in 40 years of teaching. This isn't normal childhood behavior. James looked from his son to the drawings, his skepticism warring with the evidence before his eyes. Even if this is something we can't explain, what are we supposed to do? We can't just break into a zoo. We don't have to break in, Ethan said, standing up and gathering his drawings. We just have to go there like normal visitors. Ghost will show me how to find him, but we have to go now. The trucks are coming at noon. The family stared at him, stunned by his sudden lucidity and the authority in his voice, so at odds with his small stature and Batman pajamas. Please, Ethan begged, tears filling his eyes. Ghost is so scared. He says the other dogs are scared too. Mr. Blackwood is selling them to the fighting men today. They're going to die. Sarah and James exchanged a long look, years of marriage allowing them to communicate without words. Finally, James nodded. Okay, he said, kneeling to Ethan's level. We'll go to the zoo, but we stay together, and if we don't find anything suspicious, we leave immediately. Understood? Ethan nodded solemnly. Ghost says thank you. 45 minutes later, the Anderson family pulled into the Pineville Zoo parking lot. The sky had darkened further, promising rain, and the lot was nearly empty, unusual for a summer weekday. That's strange, Sarah remarked as they approached the entrance. Where is everyone? A sign on the ticket booth answered her question. Closed for maintenance. Reopening tomorrow. We apologize for the inconvenience. No, Ethan cried, pulling at the locked gate. They're lying. They closed it so nobody would see the trucks. Ghost says they're packing up right now. James tried to calm his son. Ethan, if the zoo is closed, there's nothing we can do. We should call animal control or the police if you're really concerned. They won't help, Ethan sobbed. Mr. Blackwood has friends in the police. Ghost showed me. Please, we have to get in somehow. As if in answer to his plea, a side door in the administrative building opened, and a young woman in a zoo uniform stepped out, lighting a cigarette. She glanced around furtively before taking a deep drag. Wait here, Sarah said, making a quick decision. She approached the woman with a friendly smile. Excuse me, I'm so sorry to bother you, but my family drove 2 hours to visit the zoo today. We didn't know it was closed. My son is heartbroken. He's been talking about seeing the animals for weeks. The woman blew out a stream of smoke, looking sympathetic but uncomfortable. I'm really sorry, ma'am, but we've got major plumbing issues. Health and safety protocols, you know. We can't let anyone in. Sarah nodded understandingly. Of course, I completely get it. Actually, my son was especially looking forward to seeing your rare Himalayan mountain hound. He did a whole school project on them. Is there any chance we could just peek at that one exhibit? It would mean the world to him. The young woman's expression changed subtly. A flash of something like guilt crossed her face. The mountain hound? I don't think that would be possible. There's a lot going on today with the maintenance and other things. Please, Sarah pressed, letting genuine concern show in her voice. My son hasn't been sleeping well. He's convinced something bad is happening to that dog. I know it sounds crazy, but if he could just see that it's okay, maybe he'll finally get some rest. The woman glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. Listen, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but she hesitated, taking another drag of her cigarette. That dog isn't what they say it is. None of them are. And if your son is worried about something bad happening, she trailed off, a conflicted look on her face. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her heart racing. The woman sighed heavily. I'm leaving this job next week anyway, so screw it. Blackwood's been running this scam for months, finding dogs at shelters, dyeing their fur, passing them off as exotic breeds. The mountain hound is just a German shepherd with a fancy dye job and a sad story. Sarah's mouth went dry. What happens to the dogs? The woman looked away. They don't stay here long. Private collectors, fighting rings. I don't ask questions. But today's a big day, moving day. That's why we're closed for maintenance. She made air quotes with her fingers. That's horrible, Sarah gasped. We need to report this to the authorities. Good luck with that, the woman snorted. Blackwood's got half the local police department in his pocket. Why do you think nobody's stopped him yet? Sarah felt sick to her stomach. Ethan had been right about everything. My son knew, she murmured. Somehow he knew. The woman frowned. What do you mean he knew? It doesn't matter, Sarah said quickly. Is there any way we could get in? Just to see what's happening? We could help expose this. The woman looked at her appraisingly, then flicked her cigarette away. My conscience has been killing me anyway. She pulled a key card from her pocket. This will get you in through the service entrance around back. But be careful. Security's on high alert today with all the merchandise moving out. Sarah took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you. What's your name? Megan, the woman replied. Megan Torres. I'm a veterinary assistant here, or I was, until I realized what was really going on. She pointed to a small door partially hidden by bushes. That door. It leads to the staff area behind the exhibits. If your son's right about the German Shepherd, he'll be in the holding area near the loading dock. Sarah hurried back to her family, explaining in hushed tones what she'd learned. James looked pale but determined. This is crazy, he muttered. We could get arrested for trespassing. And if we do nothing, dozens of dogs will be sold into fighting rings, Sarah countered. I couldn't live with myself. Could you? James looked at his son, who was clutching his drawings to his chest, his eyes fixed on the zoo buildings with unwavering intensity. No, he sighed. I couldn't. They made their way into the service entrance, Ethan leading them with surprising confidence for a 5-year-old. The keycard worked, granting them access to a narrow hallway lined with lockers and equipment. This way, Ethan whispered, turning left without hesitation. Ghost is showing me. They followed him through a maze of corridors, freezing whenever they heard voices or footsteps. Twice they had to duck into storage rooms to avoid being seen by staff members. How does he know where he's going? Emma whispered, staying close to her mother's side. Even the usually skeptical 7-year-old couldn't deny the strangeness of what was happening. "I don't know," Sarah replied honestly, "but I'm starting to think we should trust him." Ethan suddenly stopped, pressing his finger to his lips. Ahead, voices echoed from around a corner. Angry, agitated voices. "I don't care what you have to do, Martinez. Just make it happen," a sharp male voice commanded. "The buyers will be here in an hour, and all the merchandise needs to be ready. The Korean client is paying premium for the shepherd, says its coloring is perfect for his collection. He's already transferred half the money." "But sir," another voice objected, "the dog is showing signs of severe distress. If we sedate him again so soon after the last dose, there could be complications. He might not survive transport." "That's a risk we'll have to take. The deal is done. If he dies, we'll tell the client there was an accident and offer a replacement. Now go." Footsteps approached, and James quickly pulled his family into a nearby custodial closet. Through the crack in the door, they caught a glimpse of a tall man in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his face twisted in a scowl, the same cold eyes Ethan had drawn with such precision. "That's him," Ethan breathed. "Mr. Blackwood." They waited until the footsteps faded before emerging from their hiding place. "We need to find Ghost now," Ethan insisted, his small face set with determination. "They're going to hurt him again." He led them down another corridor and through a set of heavy double doors. The smell hit them immediately. The unmistakable odor of too many animals kept in too small a space. They found themselves in a large room filled with cages of various sizes. In each cage was a dog, many with coats dyed unusual colors or patterns. "Oh my God," Sarah gasped, taking in the sight. "There must be 20 dogs here." Ethan moved purposefully through the room, stopping before a cage in the corner. Inside, the silver-gray German shepherd lay on its side, its breathing shallow and labored. A half-empty syringe lay on a tray outside the cage. "Ghost," Ethan called softly, pressing his hands against the bars. "I came, just like I promised." The dog's eyes fluttered open, focusing with visible effort on the small boy. It tried to stand but collapsed, its legs too weak to support its weight. "They already gave him the medicine," Ethan said, tears streaming down his face. "He says it hurts and makes him sleepy. We need to get him out now." James examined the cage lock. "It's a standard padlock. I can't open this without tools." "Check the desk over there," Sarah suggested, pointing to a cluttered workstation in the corner. "There might be keys." James rummaged through the desk drawers while Sarah took photos of the facility with her phone. "We'll need evidence when we report this." "What about the other dogs?" Emma asked, looking around at the cages. "We can't just leave them." "We can't save them all ourselves," Sarah explained gently. "But once we get Ghost out and alert the authorities, they'll come for the others." "Here," James triumphantly held up a ring of keys. "One of these should work." As he began trying keys in the padlock, the door to the room burst open. A man in a lab coat stood frozen in the doorway, staring at them in shock. "What the hell are you doing in here?" he demanded, reaching for the radio on his belt. "This is a restricted area." "Don't!" Sarah stepped forward, her phone held out like a weapon. "We know what's happening here. We've documented everything and sent the photos to multiple people already. If you call security, those photos go to the state police and the media." The man hesitated, his hand still on the radio. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Blackwood will..." "Blackwood will what?" James interrupted, still working on the lock. "Hurt us? Add us to his merchandise? Go ahead and call him. We're not leaving without this dog." The man's eyes darted between them, calculating. "You're making a mistake. These aren't just random dogs. They're shelter dogs with dyed fur," Sarah finished for him. "We know the scam, and we know about the fighting rings and the collectors. How do you sleep at night, knowing what happens to these animals?" A flicker of shame crossed the man's face. "I'm a veterinarian. I make sure they're healthy enough for transport. What happens after they leave here isn't my responsibility." "Yes, it is," Emma said suddenly, her 7-year-old voice ringing with conviction. "You know it's wrong, and you do it anyway. That makes it your fault, too." The man stared at the little girl, momentarily speechless. "Got it," James exclaimed as the padlock finally clicked open. He swung the cage door wide, and Ethan immediately climbed inside, wrapping his arms around Ghost's neck. "It's okay now," he whispered into the dog's fur. "You're safe. We're going to take you home." The veterinarian seemed to come to a decision. He closed the door behind him and approached them slowly. "You'll never make it out of here with him. Security is everywhere today because of the shipment, and that dog can barely walk. The sedative was strong." "Then help us," Sarah challenged. "Do the right thing for once." The man ran a hand through his thinning hair, conflict evident on his face. "I could lose my license. I could go to jail." "You could go to jail anyway when this operation is exposed," James pointed out. "Helping us might look good for you later." A tense silence fell over the room as the veterinarian weighed his options. Outside, thunder rumbled, and rain began to patter against the high windows. "Dr. Martinez!" A sharp voice crackled over the radio on the man's belt. "The Korean buyer has arrived early. Bring the shepherd to loading dock C immediately." The veterinarian looked at the family, then at Ethan cradling the half-conscious dog. Something in his expression changed, resolve replacing uncertainty. "There's a service exit through the quarantine ward," he said quickly, moving to a cabinet and removing a small vial. "I can give him a mild stimulant to counteract the sedative enough for him to walk. It's not ideal, but it's your only chance." He filled a syringe with clear liquid. "Hold him steady." James helped Ethan hold Ghost's head while the veterinarian administered the injection. "This will take a few minutes to work. When it does, you need to move fast. Take the corridor to your right, second left, then through the double doors marked Quarantine. The exit there leads to the staff parking lot." "Why are you helping us?" Sarah asked as the man pocketed his radio, effectively cutting off communication with security. He looked at Ethan, who was whispering reassurances to Ghost, then shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe I'm tired of not sleeping at night." He handed James a ring of keys. "The blue key opens the quarantine doors. The red one opens the exit. Now go. I'll give you as much time as I can." As they prepared to leave, the veterinarian paused. "How did you know about this place? About the shepherd specifically?" Sarah glanced at Ethan. "You wouldn't believe us if we told you." "Try me," the man said. "I've seen a lot of strange things in this place." "My son can communicate with him somehow," she replied simply. The dog told him what was happening. Instead of the skepticism she expected, the veterinarian nodded slowly. 3 weeks ago, I caught Ethan sitting outside that dog's enclosure. He was talking to it, and the dog was responding in ways I've never seen. Blackwood noticed too. He was disturbed by it. That's why he moved up the schedule to get rid of the shepherd. "Ethan wasn't with us 3 weeks ago," James said, confused. "We just arrived in Pineville 2 days ago." The veterinarian frowned. "That's impossible. I saw a boy, same age, same appearance. He even had the same Batman backpack your son is carrying." Before they could process this bewildering information, Ghost staggered to his feet. The stimulant was working. "We need to go," Sarah urged, helping Ethan guide the dog out of the cage. "We can figure this out later." They moved swiftly through the corridor, Ghost gaining strength with each step. Ethan kept one hand buried in the dog's fur, murmuring encouragement as they navigated the maze of hallways. Just as they reached the quarantine doors, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began flashing in the corridors. "They know," James said grimly, fumbling with the keys. "Hurry!" The blue key slid into the lock, turning with a satisfying click. They rushed through the quarantine ward, a sterile space with empty cages and examination tables. At the far end, a heavy metal door promised freedom. James was inserting the red key when footsteps pounded in the corridor behind them. The door to the quarantine ward burst open, and Victor Blackwood stood there, flanked by 2 security guards. His face was contorted with rage. "Stop right there," he shouted. "That animal is property of Pineville Zoo." Ghost growled low in his throat, moving protectively in front of Ethan, despite his weakened state. "This is a German shepherd, not an exotic species," Sarah stated firmly. "And we have photographic evidence of your entire operation." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, lady. That dog is worth more than you can imagine, and not just for its appearance. There's something unusual about it, something valuable to the right buyer." "He's not a thing," Ethan said, his voice small but unwavering. "He's Ghost, and he belongs with us." Blackwood sneered. "The famous Ethan. The dog told me all about you." At their startled expressions, he laughed coldly. "Oh yes, your son isn't the only one who's noticed something special about this animal. The difference is, I know how to profit from it." "You're insane," James growled, positioning himself between his family and the advancing men. "Maybe," Blackwood shrugged, but I'm also going to be very rich after today's sale. Now, hand over the dog, or things will get unpleasant." Time seemed to slow as the standoff intensified. The security guards took a step forward, hands hovering near their tasers. James pushed his family further behind him, desperately searching for an escape route. Ghost, though still weak from the sedative, maintained his protective stance in front of Ethan, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "This is your last warning," Blackwood said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Give me the dog, and you can walk out of here. Continue this foolishness, and you'll all regret it." Sarah clutched Emma to her side, her mind racing. "We've already sent the evidence to multiple people," she bluffed, hoping the tremor in her voice wasn't noticeable. "If anything happens to us, they'll go straight to the FBI." Blackwood's laugh was cold and dismissive. A desperate lie from a desperate woman. Nobody sent anything. The tension in the room was palpable, electricity crackling in the air as both sides calculated their next move. Then, from somewhere behind Blackwood, came a new voice, female, authoritative, unexpected. "Actually, she's not lying." All heads turned to see Dr. Megan Torres step into view, holding up her phone. The veterinary assistant who had given them the keycard stood beside her, looking nervous but resolute. "I've been documenting everything for months," Torres continued, her voice steady despite the danger. "The fake exotic breeds, the animal abuse, the illegal sales, all of it. And yes, I've already uploaded everything to a secure server with instructions to release it all if I don't check in hourly." Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "Torres, I should have fired you weeks ago when Martinez reported your snooping." "You mean Dr. Martinez?" Torres nodded towards someone behind her, and the veterinarian who had helped them stepped into view. "He's been working with me for the past week. Turns out even he has limits to what he'll tolerate." Martinez wouldn't meet Blackwood's gaze, but he stood his ground. "The Korean buyer saw the upload alert on his phone. He's pulling out of the deal and leaving as we speak. It's over, Victor." For a moment, it seemed as though Blackwood might explode with fury. Then, with frightening speed, his expression shifted to one of calculated calm. "You stupid, idealistic fools! Do you think this ends with me? There are people above me, people with real power, who make millions from these operations." "We'll take our chances," Torres replied coolly. "Now, these people are leaving with that dog, and you're going to let them." Blackwood's eyes narrowed to slits. "And why would I do that?" "Because," Torres said, stepping aside to reveal two uniformed police officers, "I finally found someone in the department who isn't on your payroll." One of the officers, a stern-looking woman with captain's bars, stepped forward. "Victor Blackwood, we have a warrant to search these premises based on evidence of animal cruelty and trafficking. You need to come with us." Blackwood's composure cracked. With a roar of rage, he lunged, not at the officers, but at Ethan and Ghost. His hand emerged from his pocket holding a syringe. "If I can't have it, no one will." What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when the family tried to piece it together, their accounts varied. Ghost, despite his weakened state, launched himself at Blackwood with unexpected speed. The German Shepherd's jaws closed around the man's wrist, the syringe clattering to the floor. Blackwood screamed, more in fury than pain, and slammed his free hand into the dog's head. "Ghost!" Ethan cried out as the dog yelped and lost his grip. Blackwood, now bleeding from puncture wounds on his wrist, reached again for the syringe, but James was faster. He tackled the zoo director, both men crashing into a metal examination table. The security guards, seeing their boss in trouble, moved to intervene, but found themselves facing the police officers, who had drawn their weapons. "Don't even think about it," the female captain ordered, her aim steady. "Hands where I can see them. Now." In the chaos, Ghost had collapsed, the exertion of attacking Blackwood having depleted his limited strength. Ethan knelt beside him, tears streaming down his face as he cradled the dog's head in his small lap. "Stay with me," he pleaded, stroking the silver-gray fur. "Please, Ghost. You have to stay with me. We're so close." Sarah joined her son, checking the dog's breathing. It was shallow but steady. "He's okay, Ethan. He's just exhausted from the medication and the excitement." Blackwood, now handcuffed and being led away by the second officer, stopped to look back at them. Despite his situation, a sinister smile played on his lips. "You think you've won? That dog won't survive the night. I made sure of it when I realized someone was asking questions. Ask your precious vet what was in that last injection." Dr. Martinez rushed forward, kneeling beside Ghost to check his vitals. His expression grew increasingly grim as he performed a quick examination. His pulse is erratic, and his pupils are dilated. This isn't just from the sedative. He looked up at Sarah and James, his face pale. Blackwood's right. There's something else in his system. Something toxic. "Can you help him?" Sarah asked, clutching Ethan's shoulders as the boy began to sob uncontrollably. Martinez shook his head helplessly. "Not here. He needs a fully equipped veterinary hospital immediately." "My clinic is 10 minutes away," Torres offered. "It's small, but I have emergency supplies and an IV set up." "It's his only chance," Martinez agreed. "We need to move him now." James scooped up the unresponsive dog, struggling slightly under the weight of the large shepherd. "Lead the way." As they rushed through the exit and into the rain-soaked parking lot, Ethan kept one hand on Ghost's fur, whispering something too soft for the others to hear. His face, tear-streaked and desperate, bore an expression no 5-year-old should ever wear, a mixture of profound grief and determined resolve. They piled into Torres' van. Ghost laid across the back with Ethan beside him, never breaking contact. The drive to the clinic passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional whimper from the dog and Ethan's continuous whispered reassurances. "What was in that injection?" Sarah finally asked Martinez, who sat rigid in the passenger seat. The veterinarian swallowed hard. "If it's what I suspect, it's a compound Blackwood acquired from his contacts in the exotic animal trade. It causes progressive organ failure, painful but not immediate. It's designed to make an animal's death look natural, happening days after it changes hands so the seller can't be blamed." "My God," Sarah breathed, horror washing over her. "Why would he do that?" "Insurance," Martinez replied grimly. "If he couldn't sell Ghost to his buyer, he'd make sure no one else could have him either. Blackwood's always been vindictive." James, holding Emma on his lap, looked back at his son and the dog. "Can it be treated?" Martinez hesitated. "Possibly, with the right medications and supportive care, but I've never personally treated a case." "I've seen it twice," Torres said from the driver's seat, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Both times with exotic reptiles that were seized from smugglers. One survived with intensive treatment. The other didn't." They pulled up to a small building with a modest sign, Pineville Veterinary Clinic, Megan Torres, DVM. Despite its size, the clinic was modern and well-maintained. "I thought you were just an assistant at the zoo," Sarah said as Torres unlocked the front door. "I own this place," Torres explained, flipping on lights and leading them to the treatment room. "I took the job at the zoo when I noticed the suspicious pattern of exotic animals coming through. Couldn't investigate properly from the outside." They transferred Ghost to an examination table, where Torres and Martinez immediately set to work. An IV line was placed, blood drawn for testing, and monitoring equipment attached to the unconscious dog. "His temperature's elevated, and his kidney values are already climbing," Torres announced after running the blood sample through a rapid analyzer. "We need to start a protocol to support his organs and try to flush the toxin." The two veterinarians worked with practiced efficiency, administering medications, hanging IV fluids, and constantly monitoring Ghost's vital signs. Through it all, Ethan remained at the dog's side, his small hand resting on the shepherd's chest, feeling each labored breath. "Is he going to die?" Emma asked in a small voice, voicing the question all of them feared to ask. Martinez and Torres exchanged a glance that didn't go unnoticed by the adults. "We're doing everything we can," Torres answered carefully. "Ghost is fighting hard." As the hours crawled by, the dog's condition continued to deteriorate despite their best efforts. His breathing became more labored, his heart rate more erratic. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and thunder shaking the small building. "I don't understand," Martinez muttered, checking another set of blood test results. "He's not responding to the treatment like he should. It's as if there's something else happening that we can't identify." Torres adjusted the IV rate, her face etched with frustration. "We're missing something. The protocols I used last time should be working better than this." Throughout the crisis, Ethan had remained almost unnaturally calm, keeping his hand on Ghost and whispering continuously into the dog's ear. Now, he looked up at the two veterinarians with eyes that seemed far older than his 5 years. "It's not just the poison," he said quietly. "Ghost says he's been sick for a long time. The bad food and the dark cage made him weak, and He hesitated. He says he's tired. He's been fighting for so long. The adults exchanged concerned glances, uncertain how to respond to this strange pronouncement from a child, but Torres knelt beside Ethan, meeting his gaze directly. "Ethan, I believe you," she said firmly. "If Ghost is talking to you, ask him if he knows where else he might be hurt or sick. Ask him to help us help him." James opened his mouth to object to this unconventional approach, but was silenced by Sarah's hand on his arm. This was beyond the boundaries of their normal world. They had to trust that there was something special happening between their son and this dog. Ethan closed his eyes, his brow furrowing in concentration as he kept his hand on Ghost's chest. The room fell silent except for the beeping of monitors and the patter of rain. After a long moment, the boy's eyes opened. He says his stomach always hurts after they feed him, and his feet burn from the floor of the cage. And, Ethan's voice caught, he says he's not sure if he wants to keep fighting. He's scared and tired, and he misses the sun. Torres nodded thoughtfully. Chronic malnutrition could definitely complicate treatment, and if they were using harsh cleaning chemicals in the enclosure without proper rinsing, that would explain the paw irritation. She turned to Martinez. "We need to adjust our approach, add nutritional support, and check for signs of chemical exposure." Martinez looked skeptical, but began preparing additional medications. "It's worth trying, I suppose." Sarah knelt beside her son, pulling him into a gentle hug. "Ethan, I know this is hard, but you need to tell Ghost that he has to keep fighting. Tell him that if he gets better, he'll never have to go back to that cage. He'll have a home with us, with sunshine and good food and people who love him." Ethan nodded solemnly and leaned close to Ghost's ear, whispering this new message. The dog's ear twitched slightly, the first voluntary movement they'd seen in hours. "I think he heard you," Emma said softly, moving closer to the examination table. His eye opened a little bit. Encouraged, James joined his family around the table. "Tell him about our backyard, Ethan. Tell him about the creek where he can swim in the summer and the big oak tree where he can rest in the shade." Ethan continued his whispered monologue, now painting a picture of the life that awaited Ghost if he could just hold on. As he spoke, the family added details: the soft bed they would buy him, the toys he would have, the walks in the park, the car rides with the window down so he could feel the wind in his fur. Torres, monitoring Ghost's vital signs, suddenly straightened. His heart rate is stabilizing. Respiration is improving too. Martinez checked the monitors himself, looking astonished. "That's unexpected." "Keep talking to him," Torres encouraged. "Whatever you're doing, it seems to be helping." Through the night, they maintained their vigil. The storm outside gradually weakened, and by dawn, the first pale light of day was filtering through the clinic windows. Ghost's condition had stabilized, not improving dramatically, but no longer actively declining. Torres, exhausted from the night's work, checked the latest blood results. His kidney values are still elevated, but they've stopped climbing. Liver function is showing slight improvement. "So, he might make it?" Sarah asked, hope creeping into her voice for the first time since they'd arrived at the clinic. "It's still touch and go," Torres cautioned. "But yes, he's got a fighting chance now. The next 24 hours will be critical." Ethan, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion and fallen asleep with his head resting against Ghost's side, stirred at these words. "He's going to make it," he mumbled sleepily. "Ghost says he wants to see our backyard." As the morning progressed, they established a rotation so family members could take breaks to eat or rest while always ensuring someone stayed with Ghost. During one such break, Sarah stepped outside the clinic to call Eleanor and update her on their extraordinary night. "So, the zoo director has been arrested?" Eleanor asked after Sarah recounted the events. "And the dog, Ghost, he's holding on?" "Yes to both," Sarah confirmed, watching through the window as James helped Ethan sip from a juice box. "The police captain said they found evidence of a much larger trafficking operation than anyone suspected. Apparently, Blackwood was just one link in an international chain." "And Ethan, how is he handling all this?" Sarah sighed, unsure how to explain what she'd witnessed. "He's incredible, Mom. So brave and focused. It's like he's operating on a completely different level. The connection he has with Ghost, I can't explain it, but I've seen it work. The dog responds to him in ways that defy medical explanation." "Perhaps some things aren't meant to be explained," Eleanor replied softly. "My mother always said children can see the world in ways adults have forgotten how to see." When Sarah returned to the treatment room, she found Dr. Torres examining Ghost's paws with a puzzled expression. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noting the veterinarian's confusion. Torres looked up, shaking her head slightly. "The irritation on his paw pads. It's healing much faster than it should be. And look at this." She gently opened one of Ghost's eyes. "His pupils are normally responsive now, which shouldn't be possible given the toxin's known effects on the nervous system." Martinez, who had stepped out to make some calls, returned in time to hear this assessment. "The lab results are showing the same thing. The toxin appears to be breaking down in his system at an accelerated rate. It's as if his body suddenly learned how to fight it." They both looked at Ethan, who was holding Ghost's paw, his eyes closed in concentration. "I've been a veterinarian for 15 years, Torres said quietly to Sarah. "I've seen animals make unexpected recoveries. I've seen the power of connection between humans and animals. But this," she gestured to Ethan and Ghost, "this is something else entirely." By mid-afternoon, Ghost was conscious, weak and groggy, but responsive. When he first opened his eyes fully and lifted his head, Ethan's face broke into a smile of such pure joy that it brought tears to everyone's eyes. "He says thank you," Ethan announced, gently stroking the dog's head. "He says you all saved him." "I think you saved him, buddy," James said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Whatever you did, whatever connection you have with him, that's what pulled him through." The door to the clinic opened, and the police captain who had arrested Blackwood entered, accompanied by another officer carrying a file folder. "Mrs. Anderson," the captain approached Sarah. "I'm Captain Rivera. I wanted to update you personally on the situation and ask a few follow-up questions, if that's all right." Sarah nodded, moving to a corner of the room to speak privately with the officers, while Torres and Martinez continued monitoring Ghost. "First, I want to thank you and your family," Rivera began, her tone sincere. "Thanks to your actions and the evidence Dr. Torres gathered, we've been able to shut down a major node in an international animal trafficking network. Blackwood is cooperating with federal authorities in exchange for consideration in his sentencing." "That's good news," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. "What about the other animals at the zoo? All being evaluated and properly cared for now. Many will require rehabilitation before they can be placed in proper homes or sanctuaries." Rivera hesitated, glancing at the file in her colleague's hands. "There's something else, though. Something unusual that came up during our investigation of Blackwood's records." The second officer opened the file and removed a photograph, handing it to Sarah. It showed a security camera still from the zoo. A small boy standing in front of Ghost's enclosure, his hand pressed against the glass. The timestamp showed a date 3 weeks earlier. "This boy," Rivera said carefully, "he bears a striking resemblance to your son." Sarah studied the image, a chill running through her. The child in the photo could indeed be Ethan, same height, same build, similar clothing, but the timestamp made that impossible. "This can't be right. We weren't even in Pineville 3 weeks ago." "That's what we thought," Rivera nodded. "A camera malfunction, perhaps. But then we found more." She motioned to her colleague, who produced several more photos, all showing the same boy visiting Ghost's enclosure on different days, dating back nearly 2 months. "I don't understand," Sarah murmured, examining the images with growing unease. "This isn't possible." According to Dr. Martinez, this mysterious child's visits coincided with moments when the dog seemed to improve despite its poor conditions. Blackwood apparently became obsessed with identifying the boy, convinced there was something unusual happening. That's why he accelerated his plans to sell the dog. He was disturbed by whatever he thought was occurring. Sarah looked across the room at Ethan, still whispering to Ghost, who was now resting his head in the boy's lap. "I don't have an explanation for you, Captain." Rivera followed her gaze, her expression softening. "Sometimes, Mrs. Anderson, in my line of work, I encounter things that don't fit neatly into reports and case files. Things that remind me the world is stranger and perhaps more wonderful than we give it credit for." She closed the file. "Consider these photos misfiled. Some questions are better left unanswered." After the police left, Sarah showed the photos to James in the clinic's small break room, while Emma sat with Ethan and Ghost. "This makes no sense," James whispered, examining the timestamps. "Ethan was in school on these dates. We have photos of him at his kindergarten spring concert the very same day as this one." Sarah took back the photos, tucking them into her purse. "There's something happening here that goes beyond what we understand, James. I think we just have to accept that. You really think our son has some kind of psychic connection with this dog? That somehow he was visiting the zoo in spirit or something while his body was at home? James ran a hand through his hair, struggling with concepts that challenged his logical worldview. I don't know what to think, Sarah admitted, but I know what I've seen. Ghost was dying, and Ethan reached him in a way no one else could. Does it really matter how? When they returned to the treatment room, they found Ghost sitting up on the examination table, still wobbly, but remarkably alert given his condition just hours earlier. Torres was checking his vital signs, a look of amazement on her face. I've never seen anything like this recovery rate, she marveled. His blood work is still concerning, but improving by the hour, and he's already eating small amounts of food. Can we take him home? Ethan asked, his face alight with hope. Torres and Martinez exchanged glances. Not yet, Torres replied gently. He still needs medical supervision and IV fluids for at least another day. But if he continues improving at this rate, possibly tomorrow. I'll stay with him, Ethan declared, with the absolute certainty only a child could muster. He gets scared when I'm not here. Honey, you need proper rest, Sarah began. But Ethan's expression stopped her. There was something in his eyes, a depth, a knowing, that she had never seen before. It has to be me, Mommy, he said simply. Ghost and I are connected. We always have been. Torres cleared her throat. We have a small cot in the back office. If you're comfortable with it, Ethan could rest there while I monitor Ghost overnight. I was planning to stay anyway. James looked ready to object, but Sarah placed a hand on his arm. It's okay, she said softly. I'll stay too. You take Emma back to your mom's and get some real sleep. We'll call if anything changes. That night, as Storm lay sleeping on the examination table, his condition steadily improving, Sarah watched her son curled up on a cot pulled close to the dog. In sleep, Ethan looked like any ordinary 6-year-old, innocent, vulnerable, his face peaceful. It was hard to reconcile this image with the extraordinary events of the past 2 days. Torres entered quietly, checking Ghost's IV line before sitting beside Sarah. He's doing amazingly well. At this rate, he might be ready for discharge tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, Sarah said sincerely, for everything. Not just the medical care, but for believing us, for helping us when it would have been easier to look the other way. Torres smiled tiredly. Some things are worth the risk. She hesitated before continuing. The police showed me those security photos too. Asked if I had ever seen that boy at the zoo before you arrived. And had you? No, Torres replied thoughtfully. But several of the night staff reported seeing a child near Ghost's enclosure after hours. When security would investigate, they'd find no one. Blackwood installed additional cameras because of it, convinced someone was breaking in. Sarah looked at her sleeping son. What do you think was happening? Torres considered the question carefully. In veterinary school, we're taught to trust observable facts, symptoms, test results, physical examination findings. But in practice, I've encountered cases where animals respond to treatment in ways that defy medical expectations. Usually these cases involve a profound connection with a human caregiver. She gestured toward Ethan and Ghost. What I've witnessed between them goes beyond anything I've seen before. Your son somehow knew details about Ghost's condition that weren't visible and couldn't have been guessed. He knew Ghost's location in the zoo without being told. He described symptoms we only confirmed after examination. But the security photos, Sarah pressed. How is that possible? Torres shook her head. I don't have a scientific explanation for you, but there are stories in many cultures about the spirits of children being able to travel, to form connections across distances. Some call it astral projection, others a form of remote viewing or bilocation. You believe in such things? Sarah asked, surprised that the science-minded veterinarian would entertain such concepts. Let's just say my grandmother was a curandera, a traditional healer in Mexico. She would have said your son has a special gift, a connection to the animal world that transcends physical limitations. Torres smiled slightly. And after what I've seen in the last 24 hours, I'm inclined to agree with her. Morning brought more improvements. Ghost was now standing on his own, eating regular meals, and showing normal neurological responses. His blood work, while not perfect, showed remarkable recovery of kidney and liver function. I can't believe I'm saying this, Martinez admitted as he reviewed the latest test results. But I think he's ready to go home. He'll need medication and careful monitoring, but the worst has passed. The news brought tears of joy to Ethan's eyes. Did you hear that, Ghost? You're coming home with us. As they prepared for discharge, filling prescriptions and reviewing care instructions, Captain Rivera returned to the clinic, her expression serious. Mrs. Anderson, she said after greeting the family, I wanted to let you know that we searched Blackwood's private office based on information he provided. We found records indicating he had been conducting unofficial experiments with Ghost, trying to understand the dog's unusual abilities. What kind of experiments? James asked, anger flaring at the thought of further abuses. Nothing invasive, thankfully, mostly observational studies and cognitive tests. Blackwood became convinced that Ghost possessed extraordinary intelligence and possibly extrasensory perception. He documented incidents where the dog appeared to know things it couldn't possibly know, upcoming visits, changes in routine, even the intentions of staff members. Rivera glanced at Ghost, who was sitting calmly beside Ethan, the boy's hand resting on his head. According to Blackwood's notes, Ghost began exhibiting these abilities around the same time the mystery child started appearing on security footage. What are you suggesting? Sarah asked, though she already sensed where this was heading. I'm not suggesting anything, Rivera replied carefully. I'm simply sharing information that might be relevant to your family going forward. Ghost isn't just a rescue dog. He may be something quite extraordinary. As they loaded Ghost into their car later that afternoon, the German Shepherd's strength returning by the hour, Ethan sat beside him in the back seat, their connection palpable even to observers. The dog's silver-gray coat gleamed in the sunlight, already looking healthier than it had in the dim zoo enclosure. Ready to go home, boy? James asked, reaching back to pat Ghost's head before starting the engine. Ghost looked at him with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to hold knowledge far beyond that of an ordinary dog. Then he turned to Ethan, resting his head on the boy's lap with a contented sigh. He's ready, Ethan confirmed, a smile spreading across his face. He says he's been waiting his whole life to find us. As they drove away from Pineville, leaving behind the horrors of the zoo and the mystery of the security photos, Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror at her son and their new family member. The bond between them was unlike anything she had ever witnessed, profound, inexplicable, beautiful in its mystery. Some connections, she realized, weren't meant to be understood through conventional means. Some bonds transcended the limitations of time, space, and even physical form. And sometimes, the most extraordinary miracles came in the form of a little boy and a silver-gray dog, whose souls had somehow found each other across impossible distances. The journey back to their hometown of Maplewood took just over 4 hours, during which Ghost mostly slept, his head resting on Ethan's lap. The family had called ahead to Eleanor, who had already contacted their local veterinarian, Dr. Wilson, to arrange for a follow-up visit the next day. How's he doing back there? Sarah asked, turning to check on Ethan and Ghost as they neared home. He's dreaming, Ethan replied, stroking the dog's ear gently, about running in a big field with lots of sunshine. James caught Sarah's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. They had decided to accept Ethan's connection with Ghost without questioning it further, allowing the mystery to remain a mystery. Emma, who had been unusually quiet throughout the drive, finally spoke up. Is Ghost going to live with us forever? Yes, James answered firmly. He's part of our family now. The little girl nodded, satisfied. Good. Ethan needs him. It was a simple statement, but profound in its insight. Throughout the crisis, Emma had watched her younger brother transform, becoming more focused, more articulate, more present than he had ever been. It was as though Ghost had awakened something in Ethan that had been dormant before. As they pulled into their driveway, the familiar sight of their 2-story suburban home was a welcome relief after the intensity of the past few days. Ghost lifted his head at the sound of the car engine shutting off, his amber eyes taking in his new surroundings with alert interest. This is home, Ghost, Ethan whispered excitedly. Our home. James opened the back door, and Ghost carefully stepped out, his legs still a bit wobbly, but growing stronger by the hour. The dog paused on the lawn, lifting his nose to the air and taking in the sense of his new environment. Then, with deliberate movements, he walked to Ethan's side and sat, as if waiting for a cue. He wants to see the backyard, Ethan announced, leading the dog around the side of the house to the gate. He says it smells like good dirt and squirrels. The family followed, watching as Ethan opened the gate to reveal their modest but well-kept backyard. A large oak tree dominated one corner, offering ample shade. A small vegetable garden occupied another section, and a wooden deck with a table and chairs extended from the back of the house. Ghost stepped into the yard tentatively, his movements becoming more confident as he explored. He sniffed the base of the oak tree, investigated the garden's perimeter, and finally made his way to a sunny patch of grass, where he lowered himself carefully and stretched out, his silver-gray coat gleaming in the late afternoon sun. "He's happy," Ethan declared, sitting cross-legged beside the dog. "He says it's exactly like I showed him." That evening, as the family settled into their normal routine, the extraordinary events at Pineville Zoo began to feel almost dreamlike. Ghost adapted to the house with remarkable ease, as though he had lived there all his life. He followed the family rules without needing to be taught, didn't beg at dinner, and seemed to innately understand which furniture he was allowed on and which was off limits. "It's like he already knows our household routines," James remarked, as Ghost calmly settled onto the designated dog bed they had hastily purchased on the way home. "He does," Ethan said matter-of-factly, assembling a puzzle on the living room floor. "I showed him everything while he was in the cage. He saw our house a lot of times before he came here." Sarah and James exchanged glances but didn't press for details. Some questions were better left unexplored. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep with Ghost lying protectively beside his bed, Sarah found herself unable to rest. She slipped on downstairs to make a cup of tea and found James already in the kitchen, staring thoughtfully at his laptop. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, filling the kettle. James shook his head. "I've been researching something. Remember how Captain Rivera mentioned Blackwood's experiments with Ghost? I was curious about what he might have discovered." Sarah joined him at the table, peering at the screen. "And there's a whole field of study around animal cognition and extraordinary animal abilities." He turned the laptop so she could see better. Cases of dogs knowing when their owners are coming home from miles away. Animals that can detect seizures or cancer before medical tests show anything. Pets finding their way home across hundreds of miles. "You think Ghost has abilities like these?" James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to think anymore, but look at this." He clicked to another tab showing an obscure scientific journal article. "There's research suggesting that certain animals can form telepathic bonds with humans, particularly children. The theory is that children's brains are more receptive to these connections because they haven't yet fully developed the filtering mechanisms adults have." "And Ethan seems especially sensitive," Sarah mused, remembering how their son had always displayed an unusual affinity for animals, even before Ghost. "There's more," James continued, his voice lowering despite the sleeping household. "I found an article about a German shepherd in a research facility in Eastern Europe. Silver-gray coat, unusual cognitive abilities. The facility was shut down due to ethical concerns 3 years ago, and all the animals were supposedly euthanized. You think Ghost might have come from there? The timing fits. Ghost is estimated to be around 4 years old, according to Torres' assessment. And look at this." He showed her a grainy photo from the article. A silver-gray shepherd puppy in a clinical setting, a small identification tag on its collar, clearly visible despite the image quality. Sarah peered closer, a chill running through her. GS7. The same tag was on Ghost's collar at the zoo. Blackwood must have known Ghost's history. "Which explains his obsession," James nodded. "He wasn't just selling an exotic-looking dog. He was trafficking a genetically enhanced animal with potentially valuable cognitive abilities." The kettle whistled, and Sarah rose to prepare her tea, her mind racing with implications. "Should we tell Ethan any of this?" James closed the laptop with a decisive click. "No. Ghost is just a dog now, our dog. Whatever happened in his past stays there. He deserves a normal life, and so does Ethan." Sarah agreed, though she wondered if normal was still possible after what they had witnessed. As she sipped her tea, she found herself strangely at peace with the uncertainty. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, only experienced and honored. The next morning brought the scheduled visit to Dr. Wilson, their family veterinarian. Sarah had called ahead to explain some of Ghost's medical history, though she had carefully edited the more extraordinary aspects of their experience. Dr. Wilson, a kindly man in his 60s who had cared for neighborhood pets for decades, examined Ghost thoroughly while Ethan watched attentively. "Well, he's definitely underweight," the doctor observed, running his hands along Ghost's ribs. And these calluses on his paw pads suggest he spent a long time on a hard surface. But overall, I'm impressed with his condition given what he's been through. Dr. Torres said he had been exposed to some kind of toxin, Sarah explained, choosing her words carefully. Dr. Wilson nodded, examining Ghost's eyes and gums. There are some signs of that. Slight jaundice in the mucous membranes, minor tremors in the hind legs. But his body seems to be clearing it remarkably well. He looked at Ethan with a warm smile. You must be taking excellent care of him. We help each other, Ethan replied simply, his hand never leaving Ghost's side. The doctor prescribed a special diet to help Ghost regain weight and strength, along with supplements to support his liver and kidney function. Bring him back in 2 weeks, and we'll run some blood work to see how he's progressing. But honestly, I think he's going to be just fine. As they were preparing to leave, Dr. Wilson pulled Sarah aside. Mrs. Anderson, I don't want to pry, but there's something unusual about this dog. Sarah tensed. What do you mean? I've been a vet for 40 years, he said quietly. I've seen thousands of German shepherds. This coloration, this particular silver gray, it's not a natural variation in the breed. It's either an extremely rare genetic mutation or what? Sarah prompted when he hesitated. Or it's the result of genetic manipulation. There were rumors in veterinary circles a few years back about a research program in Eastern Europe breeding dogs with enhanced physical and cognitive abilities. The photos I saw of those animals had a similar coat color. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. That sounds like science fiction, Dr. Wilson. The old veterinarian smiled kindly. Perhaps, but I've learned over the years that the truth is often stranger than fiction. Whatever Ghost's origins, he's found a good home with your family. That's what matters most. On the drive back, Sarah debated whether to share this conversation with James. They had agreed to leave Ghost's mysterious past behind, but it seemed determined to follow them. Ghost says Dr. Wilson is a good doctor, Ethan remarked from the back seat, interrupting her thoughts. But he knew Ghost was special as soon as he saw him. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror, startled. Did Ghost tell you that? Ethan nodded, absently stroking the dog's head. Ghost says lots of people will know he's special, but we don't need to worry. He won't let anyone take him away again. The confidence in her 5-year-old's voice should have been comical coming from such a small child, but instead, Sarah found it oddly reassuring. Whatever bond existed between Ethan and Ghost, it seemed to provide a sense of security to both of them. As the weeks passed, life gradually settled into a new routine. Ghost grew stronger daily, his coat becoming glossier, his eyes brighter. He fit seamlessly into the family dynamic, intuiting each person's needs with uncanny precision. When Emma was struggling with a difficult homework assignment, Ghost would sit beside her, offering silent companionship until her frustration passed. When James worked late in his home office, the dog would quietly nudge his arm at exactly 10 p.m., a gentle reminder to get some rest. For Sarah, who occasionally suffered from migraine headaches, Ghost would appear at her side minutes before an attack started, giving her time to take her medication. But it was with Ethan that Ghost's extraordinary connection was most evident. The two were inseparable, communicating in ways that went beyond words or conventional understanding. Ethan's teachers reported a remarkable transformation in the previously shy boy. He was more engaged in class, more confident in social situations, more articulate in expressing his thoughts. It's as though a door has opened in his mind, his kindergarten teacher told Sarah during a parent-teacher conference. He's always been bright, but now he's accessing his intelligence in new ways. Sarah knew better than to explain the true catalyst for this change. Instead, she simply smiled and thanked the teacher for her observations. At home, Ethan continued to relay messages from Ghost, though with decreasing frequency as the weeks went by. The content shifted as well, moving from urgent communications about needs and dangers to more ordinary observations and thoughts. Ghost says the squirrel in our backyard has 3 babies in the nest, Ethan might announce at breakfast. Or, Ghost thinks it's going to rain later, even though the sky is blue now. Invariably, these statements proved accurate, though Sarah and James tacitly agreed not to make too much of this fact. Some things were better accepted than analyzed. One evening, about 6 weeks after bringing Ghost home, Sarah found Ethan sitting on the back porch steps, his arm around the dog's neck as they watched the sunset together. The image was so peaceful, so perfect in its simplicity, that she hesitated to interrupt. "Mind if I join you two?" she asked after a moment. Ethan patted the step beside him, and Sarah sat down, enjoying the warm evening air and the vibrant colors painting the western sky. "Ghost is getting better at talking to other people too," Ethan said after a comfortable silence. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is he now?" Ethan nodded seriously. "Not with words like he uses with me, but he's learning to send feelings and pictures. He says grown-ups are harder because they have too many other thoughts in the way, but he's practicing." As if in confirmation, Ghost turned his amber eyes to Sarah. For a brief, disorienting moment, she felt a wave of warmth and gratitude wash over her. Emotions that didn't seem to originate from within herself. An image flashed in her mind. Ghost as a puppy, alone in a sterile facility, yearning for connection. The sensation passed as quickly as it had come, leaving Sarah breathless and slightly dizzy. Did he just show you where he came from?" Ethan finished for her. "Yeah, he wants you to know he remembers, but he's not sad about it anymore because it led him to us." Sarah placed a trembling hand on Ghost's head, overwhelmed by the implication. "Can he do that with everyone?" Ethan considered this. Not everyone, just people he trusts completely. He's tried with Daddy a few times, but Daddy's mind is very busy and doesn't notice yet. This new development should have alarmed her, but Sarah found herself accepting it with surprising equanimity. The world as she had understood it had already been irrevocably altered. What was one more impossibility in the face of everything they had experienced? That night, as she related the incident to James, she expected skepticism. Instead, he looked thoughtful. "I've been having these, I don't know what to call them, flashes, brief moments where I suddenly know what Ghost wants or needs without any obvious signal from him." He shook his head, marveling at his own admission. "I kept telling myself it was just good observation or coincidence, but maybe it's something more." Sarah took his hand. "Does it frighten you? This possibility?" James considered the question. "It should. Everything logical in me says this is impossible, that we're imagining things or rationalizing coincidences. But when I look at Ethan, how he's flourished since Ghost came into our lives, I can't bring myself to question it too deeply." A month later, their peaceful adaptation was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Sarah opened the door one Saturday morning to find Captain Rivera standing on their porch, dressed in civilian clothes. "Mrs. Anderson," she greeted with a nod, "I apologize for arriving without calling first, but I thought it might be better to discuss certain matters in person." Sarah invited her in, suddenly anxious. "Is this about Blackwood? Has something happened with the case?" "In a manner of speaking," Rivera replied, taking a seat in the living room. "Blackwood has been cooperating extensively with federal authorities, providing information about the entire trafficking network. In exchange, he's likely to receive a reduced sentence." Ghost, who had been dozing in the sunlight from the window, immediately rose and positioned himself between Rivera and the hallway leading to the children's rooms, his posture alert but not aggressive. Rivera noticed the dog's protective stance. "He looks well, very different from when I last saw him." "He's thriving," Sarah confirmed, "but somehow I don't think you came all this way just to check on his recovery." Rivera smiled slightly, appreciating Sarah's directness. "No, I didn't." She reached into her bag and removed a manila envelope. "During further investigation of Blackwood's files, we discovered additional information about Ghost's origins. Information I thought you should have." She removed several documents from the envelope, spreading them on the coffee table. Ghost, or Subject GS7 as he was designated, was part of a classified research program called Project Sentinel. The program was focused on developing animals with enhanced cognitive abilities for military and intelligence applications. Sarah glanced at the documents, which included scientific reports, brain scans, and progress evaluations. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're dealing with," Rivera replied. GS7 wasn't just any test subject. He was the program's most successful result. According to these records, he demonstrated unprecedented abilities in telepathic communication, particularly with children involved in the testing. "There were children in this program?" Sarah asked, horrified. Rivera nodded grimly. "The ethical violations were what ultimately led to the program's shutdown. The scientists discovered that while the genetically modified animals could form limited connections with adult subjects, they bonded much more powerfully with prepubescent children, whose neurological development was still in flux. What happened to the children? They were removed from the program when the ethics committee intervened. Their identities were protected, and they received psychological support. Rivera tapped another document. What's interesting is that even after separation, some of the children continued to report visits from their animal partners, dreams or visions where the connection maintained itself across distance. Sarah thought of the security camera footage from the zoo, showing a child identical to Ethan visiting Ghost weeks before they arrived in Pineville, like a form of astral projection. That's one theory the researchers considered, Rivera confirmed. They believed the bond created between child and animal was so profound that it transcended physical limitations, allowing the child's consciousness to locate and connect with the animal even from great distances. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked again, though she already suspected the answer. Rivera met her gaze directly. "Because according to Blackwood's records, in the weeks before your family visited the zoo, Ghost began displaying behavior consistent with having re-established contact with a human partner. He would stare at empty space, react to unseen stimuli, and show marked improvement in his condition, despite the poor environment." "You think Ethan was connecting with Ghost before they ever physically met?" "I think," Rivera said carefully, "that your son and this dog share a bond that exists outside our conventional understanding of reality. And I think you need to be prepared for what that might mean going forward." "Are you here to take Ghost away?" Sarah asked, tension evident in her voice. Behind her, Ghost had moved closer, his eyes fixed on Rivera. "No," the captain assured her quickly. "Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm here to make sure he stays with you." She produced another document from the envelope. "This is an official adoption certificate, processed through legitimate channels. It confirms your family's legal ownership of Ghost and classifies him as a standard domestic pet, not research property. My colleague in the FBI made sure it's bulletproof. No one can challenge it." Sarah took the paper, relief washing over her. "Thank you. But why would you do this for us?" Rivera was quiet for a moment, seeming to debate how much to share. "My younger brother had leukemia when we were children. During his treatment, he formed an unusual bond with a therapy dog at the hospital, claimed he could hear the dog's thoughts, that they spoke to each other when no one else was around. The doctors called it a coping mechanism, a fantasy created by a sick child's mind." She smiled sadly at the memory. "But that dog would alert the nurses minutes before my brother had seizures or adverse reactions to medications. It would refuse to leave his side on days when his condition would suddenly worsen. I witnessed things that medical science couldn't explain." "What happened?" Sarah asked gently. "My brother recovered, against the odds. The dog died a few years later, just stopped eating one day and was gone within a week. The night it died, my brother woke up crying, saying he'd dreamed the dog came to say goodbye." Rivera straightened in her seat, composing herself. "I've never forgotten that. It taught me there are connections in this world that defy conventional explanation." Ghost approached Rivera now, sitting directly in front of her and meeting her gaze. The captain stared back, an odd expression crossing her face, something between confusion and revelation. I could have sworn." She shook her head, bewildered. "For a second I thought I felt—" "Gratitude," came Ethan's voice from the hallway entrance. No one had heard him approach. "Ghost is saying thank you for helping us and for understanding." Rivera looked at the boy, then back at the dog, whose intelligent amber eyes remained fixed on her. "Well," she said softly, "you're very welcome, Ghost." After Rivera left, Sarah gathered the documents and placed them in the family safe, unsure whether she would ever share their contents with James or the children. Some knowledge was a burden, and their lives were complicated enough without adding government conspiracies and genetic experiments to the mix. When she returned to the living room, she found Ethan and Ghost exactly where they always seemed to be, together, existing in a harmony that transcended ordinary human-animal relationships. Ethan was reading aloud from a book, his small finger tracing the words on the page, while Ghost listened with apparent interest. "Ghost likes when I read to him," Ethan explained, noticing his mother watching. "He says the stories help him understand people better." Sarah sat beside them, ruffling Ethan's hair affectionately. "You two have quite a special friendship, don't you?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Ghost says we're not just friends. We're connected forever, even when we can't see each other." He looked up at his mother with eyes that seemed too wise for his years. like before, when I could visit him at the zoo even though my body was here at home. Sarah had never directly acknowledged this aspect of their bond, preferring to let the mystery remain unspoken. But now she found herself asking, "How did that work, Ethan? How were you able to find Ghost before we ever went to Pineville?" Ethan considered the question with the serious contemplation children reserve for matters of genuine importance. "It started with dreams. I kept dreaming about a silver dog who was sad and locked in a dark place. He would talk to me in the dreams, tell me his name was Ghost, and show me where he was. And then what happened? One night, I really wanted to help him, more than anything in the whole world. I fell asleep thinking about him, and when I woke up, I was still in my bed, but I was also there with him, like my thinking part could go places without my body." "Weren't you scared?" Sarah asked, marveling at her son's matter-of-fact description of something so extraordinary. Ethan shook his head. "Not with Ghost. He made me brave. He taught me how to find him, how to see through walls and locked doors. We practiced a lot, and it got easier. I would visit him every night, and sometimes during quiet time at school." Ghost rested his head on Ethan's knee, a gesture of such simple affection that it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Whatever forces had brought these two souls together, across distance, across seemingly insurmountable barriers, had created something beautiful. "Ghost says it doesn't matter how we found each other," Ethan continued, interpreting the dog's silent communication with practiced ease. "Just that we did. And now we'll always be able to find each other, no matter what." Sarah wrapped an arm around her son's shoulders, her other hand coming to rest on Ghost's soft fur. In that moment, she felt it too, a whisper of connection, a sense of something larger than herself, a glimpse into mysteries she would never fully comprehend, but could learn to accept with wonder rather than fear. Outside, the late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of the oak tree, casting dappled shadows across the lawn. A squirrel chattered from a high branch, and somewhere in the distance, children laughed as they played. Ordinary sounds, ordinary moments, made extraordinary by the knowledge that the world contained more magic than most people ever suspected. Ghost says, even when people don't believe in magic, it's still there, Ethan said, seemingly reading his mother's thoughts. You just have to know how to look for it. Sarah smiled, content in the knowledge that her son had found a kind of magic most people spend their whole lives searching for. The purest connection between two souls who recognize each other across all boundaries and limitations. And in witnessing this bond, perhaps she too had glimpsed something of the miraculous hiding within the ordinary fabric of existence. 6 months passed, each day bringing new developments in Ghost's recovery and integration into the Anderson family. The once malnourished, frightened dog had transformed into a strong, confident companion with a gleaming silver-gray coat and alert amber eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Dr. Wilson pronounced him in perfect health during their latest checkup, marveling at his remarkable recovery. I've never seen an animal bounce back from such severe conditions so completely, the veterinarian had commented, reviewing Ghost's latest blood work. It's almost as if he's healing himself through sheer force of will. Or perhaps, Sarah thought, but didn't say, through the power of an extraordinary connection with a 5-year-old boy. Life had settled into comfortable rhythms. Ghost accompanied Ethan to school for special events, charming teachers and classmates alike, with his impeccable behavior and obvious devotion to the boy. James had installed a doggy door leading to their fenced backyard, allowing Ghost the freedom to come and go as he pleased. Emma had appointed herself responsible for his grooming, spending hours brushing his luxurious coat while telling him about her day at school. And Ethan, quiet, sometimes hesitant Ethan, had blossomed. His kindergarten teacher reported that he had become one of the most articulate students in class, often sharing insights that seemed beyond his years. His social skills had improved dramatically as well, with Ghost serving as a natural conversation starter with other children. Ghost told me that Max is sad today because his hamster died, Ethan might say, approaching a classmate with genuine compassion. Or, Ghost thinks you'd be good at drawing, you should try using the blue marker. These uncanny observations were generally attributed to a sensitive child's heightened empathy, rather than actual communication with a dog. After all, the adult mind naturally resists explanations that challenge its understanding of reality. It was easier to believe that Ethan was simply unusually perceptive. The family had learned to navigate this delicate balance, acknowledging the extraordinary bond between boy and dog within their home, while presenting a more conventional narrative to the outside world. Ghost, for his part, seemed to understand the necessity of this discretion, behaving like an exceptionally well-trained but otherwise ordinary dog in public. One crisp autumn morning, as leaves fell from the oak tree in their backyard, Sarah looked out the kitchen window to see Ethan and Ghost sitting beneath its branches. The boy appeared to be deep in conversation, his small hands gesturing animatedly, while Ghost listened with characteristic intensity. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist as they both observed the scene. "What do you think they're talking about?" he asked, his voice holding a hint of wonder that had not diminished despite months of witnessing their unusual connection. "Who knows?" Sarah replied softly. "Ghosts past, maybe, or the secrets of the universe. With those two, it could be anything." Later that afternoon, as Sarah folded laundry in the living room, Ethan approached her with an unusually serious expression. "Mommy," he began, Ghost at his side as always, "Ghost says it's time to tell you something important." Sarah set aside the towel she'd been folding. "What is it, honey?" Ethan sat cross-legged on the carpet, Ghost settling beside him in perfect synchronicity. "Ghost says there are others like him, other special animals who can talk to people, and there are people looking for them, bad people who want to use them for wrong things." A chill ran through Sarah at this unexpected announcement. What kind of bad people? Scientists who worked with Ghost before. Ghost says they lost their funding when their project was shut down, but they've been working in secret. They want to find the animals who escaped or were adopted out. Sarah struggled to maintain a calm expression, despite her rising alarm. "How does Ghost know this?" "He can feel them searching," Ethan replied simply. "Their minds are like flashlights in the dark, looking for bright spots. Ghost has been hiding his brightness so they can't find him, but it's getting harder because he's getting stronger." The matter-of-fact way Ethan delivered this disturbing information made it all the more unsettling. Sarah glanced at Ghost, whose intelligent eyes met hers with what seemed like apology. Is there something we should do?" she asked, addressing both her son and the dog. Ethan nodded. "Ghost says we need to find the others before the bad people do. He can feel 3 of them nearby, within a day's drive. They're scared and don't understand what's happening to them." "Ethan, we can't just—" "Ghost says it's important, Mommy. Really important. The bad people are getting closer." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to process this unexpected development. "Let me talk to your father about this, okay? This is a lot to think about."
Ethan nodded solemnly. "Ghost says there's still time, but not much. The closest one is a border collie living with an old man about 2 hours from here. The old man doesn't know his dog is special."
That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah related the conversation to James. She expected skepticism or resistance, but her husband surprised her. "I've been having these dreams," he admitted, his voice low, "for the past few weeks. Dreams about other dogs, different breeds, different places, but all with the same kind of awareness in their eyes that Ghost has. I thought it was just my subconscious processing everything that's happened, but—"
"You think they're real? That Ghost is somehow showing you these other animals?"
James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he often made when confronting something beyond his understanding. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Sarah. 6 months ago, I would have said all of this was impossible. Now, our son communicates telepathically with a genetically enhanced dog who escaped from a secret government program. We left impossible behind a long time ago." Sarah couldn't argue with that logic. "So, what do we do? Start driving around looking for special dogs based on our son's conversations with Ghost?" "Maybe we start with one," James suggested after a thoughtful pause. "The border collie Ethan mentioned. We could make it a weekend trip, tell the kids we're going to see the fall foliage. If we find nothing, it's just a family outing. If we find something, then we deal with it," Sarah finished for him, "one impossible thing at a time." The following Saturday found the Anderson family driving through the rolling countryside 2 hours from their home, autumn colors painting the landscape in vivid reds and golds. Emma was engrossed in a book in the back seat, while Ethan sat with his hand resting on Ghost's neck, the dog alert and focused as he gazed out the window. "How are we supposed to find this border collie?" Sarah asked quietly, not wanting to draw Emma's attention to the true purpose of their trip. "We can't exactly knock on doors asking if people have psychic dogs." "Ghost will know when we're close," Ethan replied confidently. "He can feel the other one's mind." They drove through a small town, following no particular route except Ethan's occasional directions. "Turn left here," he would say, or "We need to go that way," pointing down country roads that wound through farms and woodland. After nearly an hour of this seemingly random navigation, Ethan suddenly sat up straight. "Stop the car! Ghost says we're really close." James pulled over to the side of the road. They had reached a rural area with scattered farmhouses and fields. Directly ahead was a modest white house with a large barn behind it, surrounded by pastures where sheep grazed peacefully. "There," Ethan said, pointing to the farm. "The border collie is there. Her name is Star, and she helps the old man with the sheep. She doesn't know why she can see pictures in people's heads. She thinks all dogs can do it." Sarah exchanged a look with James. "Now what? We can't just walk up to a stranger's house and ask about his dog." As if in answer to her question, a pickup truck turned into the farm's driveway. An elderly man stepped out, followed by a black and white border collie who immediately went to work herding the sheep in the nearest pasture. "That's her," Ethan whispered excitedly. "That's Star." Ghost let out a soft whine, pressing closer to the window. The border collie, though focused on her task, suddenly froze and looked directly toward their car, her posture alert, her head tilted in curiosity. "She feels Ghost," Ethan explained. "She's surprised because she's never felt another mind like hers before." James made a quick decision. "Wait here," he told Sarah. "I'll go talk to the farmer, make up some story about being interested in buying sheep or something." "I need to go too," Ethan insisted. "With Ghost. Star is scared and confused. Ghost needs to explain things to her." Sarah hesitated, her maternal instinct warning against involving her young son in this strange mission. But she had learned over the past months to trust the unusual wisdom that came through Ethan's connection with Ghost. "Okay," she agreed reluctantly, "but Emma and I will wait here, and at the first sign of any problem, you come right back to the car." James, Ethan, and Ghost approached the farm, where the old man was watching his border collie work the sheep with obvious pride. He looked up as they neared, his weathered face curious but not unwelcoming. "Hello there," James called, offering a friendly wave. "Sorry to bother you. We were driving by and my son noticed your border collie. She's quite impressive." The old man smiled, revealing missing teeth. "That's Star, best herding dog I've ever had. Been raising sheep for 40 years, and I've never seen her equal." As they talked, Ghost and Star locked eyes across the pasture. The border collie abandoned her task, something the old man noted with surprise, and trotted over to where Ghost sat beside Ethan. The two dogs circled each other, sniffing and observing with an intensity that went beyond normal canine greeting. "Well, I'll be," the farmer remarked. "Star doesn't usually take to strange dogs, too focused on her work. But she seems to like yours." "His name is Ghost," Ethan said, watching the dogs with a knowing smile. "He's special, like Star." The old man looked down at Ethan with raised eyebrows. "Is that so? And what makes you think my Star is special, young man?" Ethan met the farmer's gaze unflinchingly. "She can see pictures in your head. She knows when the sheep are in trouble before you do. Sometimes she wakes you up at night right before you have those pains in your chest." The old man's smile faded, replaced by an expression of shock. "How could you possibly know about—" "Ghost is telling me what Star told him," Ethan explained matter-of-factly. "Star says she's been taking care of you for 3 years, ever since she found you at the shelter. She picked you because she knew you needed her." James placed a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder, concerned about the farmer's reaction to these revelations. But the old man wasn't angry. He looked stunned, then thoughtful, his weathered face softening as he looked at his dog with new understanding. "She did pick me, that's true enough," he said quietly, walked right up to me at the county shelter, ignored everyone else. I'd gone in looking for a young male, but ended up with this half-grown female instead. Couldn't tell you why, except it felt right. He studied Ghost with newfound interest. "Your dog, he's like her?" "Yes," James confirmed, deciding that honesty was the best approach. "We believe they might have come from the same background, and we think there might be people looking for dogs like them." "Bad people," Ethan added solemnly. The old man's face hardened. "Nobody's taking my Star. She's all I've got since the wife passed." "We don't want to take her," James assured him quickly. "We want to help protect her, and you. There are things you should know, precautions you might want to take." Over the next hour, as the dogs continued their silent communion and the sheep grazed peacefully, James shared a carefully edited version of Ghost's history and their concerns about researchers potentially tracking down the escaped test subjects. The farmer, whose name was Harold Jenkins, listened with surprising receptiveness. "Always knew there was something different about Star," he admitted. "Way she looks at me sometimes, like she knows exactly what I'm thinking. And those nights she woke me up right before I had my first heart attack. Doctor said she probably saved my life. Never could figure how she knew." "Ghost says Star is really strong. Her mind is bright and clear," Ethan reported, coming over from where he'd been sitting with the dogs. "But she needs to learn to hide her brightness, or the bad people might find her." "And how does she do that?" Harold asked, addressing Ethan directly, without the condescension adults often show children. "Ghost can teach her. He learned how to make his mind quiet when he was in the cage, so the scientist couldn't tell how special he was. He says it's like pulling a blanket over a light." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "And how long does this teaching take?" Ethan looked to Ghost, then back to Harold. "Ghost says he can start today, but Star will need practice. She's not used to hiding. She's always been free to be herself with you." The old man's eyes glistened with sudden moisture. "She has at that. Never tried to hide anything from me, and I won't ask her to start now. But if there's danger coming, I want her to be safe." He knelt slowly, his arthritic knees protesting, and beckoned to Star. The border collie came immediately, pressing her head against his outstretched hand. "You do what you need to do, girl. I'll be right here." As the afternoon progressed, the strange tableau in the pasture might have seemed ordinary to a casual observer. A family visiting a farmer, children playing with dogs, adults chatting as the day waned. But beneath this mundane surface, something extraordinary was unfolding. Through Ethan's translations, Harold learned more about Star's unique abilities and her perspective on their life together. In turn, Star learned about her origins and the potential danger she faced. Ghost, serving as both teacher and translator, guided the border collie through mental exercises to help her conceal her psychic signature from those who might be searching. Ethan, acting as interpreter between the dogs and humans, facilitated a level of cross-species communication that few would believe possible. As evening approached and the family prepared to leave, arrangements had been made. Harold would call if he noticed anything suspicious around his farm. James had installed a secure messaging app on the old man's phone that would allow them to communicate without leaving digital traces that might be monitored. And Ghost had established a mental connection with Star that would allow them to communicate across distances, at least within certain limits. "Ghost says he will check on Star every night," Ethan explained, as they said their goodbyes. "He can reach her mind even from our house." Harold shook James's hand firmly. "Never thought I'd be wrapped up in some government conspiracy at my age. But for Star, I'd take on the whole darn army if I had to." He looked down at Ethan with genuine respect. "You're a special boy, son. Take good care of that dog of yours." "We take care of each other," Ethan replied with a smile, echoing Ghost's sentiment. As they drove home in the gathering dusk, Emma, who had eventually joined them at the farm and been given a simplified explanation of the situation, looked thoughtfully at Ghost. "Can he talk to me too?" she asked suddenly. "Like he talks to Ethan?" Sarah turned in her seat to face her daughter. "Would you want him to?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "It would be so cool. Then we could all talk to him, not just Ethan." "Ghost says he's trying," Ethan offered. "It's easier with me because we have a special connection, but he's been practicing with all of you. Sometimes you might feel things or see pictures that come from him. Like when I knew exactly where my lost math homework was, even though I hadn't seen it in days," Emma mused. "Or when I woke up right before my alarm went off because I felt like someone was reminding me about the science fair." Ethan grinned. "That was Ghost helping you. He says he's getting better at sending simple messages to everyone in the family." James caught Sarah's eye, a silent confirmation passing between them. They had both experienced moments like these, inexplicable flashes of knowing something they shouldn't, often related to Ghost or the children's needs. "We're becoming a psychically linked family," James joked, though his voice held a note of genuine wonder. "Next thing you know, we'll be finishing each other's sandwiches," both children chorused, dissolving into giggles. The levity was a welcome relief after the tension of the day. Yet as they drove through the darkening countryside, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically their lives had changed in the past 6 months, and on the new complications they now faced. Minding and protecting other animals like Ghost would involve risks. The people searching for these valuable test subjects would likely have resources and determination that the Anderson family could hardly match. But looking at Ghost, alert and watchful in the back seat between her children, Sarah felt an unexpected sense of confidence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, human and canine, ordinary and extraordinary, bound by connections that transcended conventional understanding. 2 weeks later, Sarah was preparing dinner when she heard a commotion at the front door. She arrived in the entryway to find James supporting an ashen-faced Harold Jenkins, with Star and Ghost circling anxiously around them. "Harold, what happened?" she exclaimed, helping James guide the elderly man to their living room couch. "Men came," Harold gasped, his breathing labored from stress and exertion. "Yesterday afternoon, said they were from animal control, checking on reports of neglected livestock. But Star knew something was wrong, started acting strange, hiding behind me instead of showing off like she usually does with visitors." James handed him a glass of water, which he drank gratefully before continuing. "They asked a lot of questions about Star, when I got her, if she'd ever shown unusual behaviors. Then one of them tried to get a DNA sample, said it was routine testing for canine diseases in the area. That's when I knew your warnings were real." "How did you get away?" Sarah asked, noting a bruise forming on Harold's cheek. "Star created a distraction, spooked the sheep into a stampede. In the chaos, we slipped out the back and made for my truck. One of them tried to stop us." He touched his bruised face. "But Star intervened. We drove all night, changing directions, making sure we weren't followed." Ethan and Emma had gathered in the doorway, listening wide-eyed to the farmer's story. Ghost moved to stand beside Star, the two dogs communicating in their silent way. "Ghost says the men had special equipment," Ethan announced. "Machines that can detect the special brain waves the dogs make. That's how they found Star." Harold nodded grimly. "They had some kind of handheld devices, kept checking them as they walked around my property." James paced the living room, processing this alarming development. "If they found Star, they might be able to track her here. We need to move quickly." "Ghost says it's okay," Ethan interjected. "He and Star are both hiding their minds now. The machines won't work if the dogs know how to shield themselves." Sarah wasn't entirely reassured. "Even so, we need to be careful. Harold, you're welcome to stay here as long as necessary, but we should think about finding somewhere more secure for both you and Star." "Star says there's another special dog we need to find right away," Ethan continued, his expression serious as he relayed the border collie's message. "A golden retriever at a children's hospital about 3 hours south. She helps sick kids, but she doesn't have anyone protecting her." James and Sarah exchanged concerned glances. Their family mission was growing more complex and potentially more dangerous. Yet the urgency was clear. If researchers were actively tracking these animals, every day mattered. "We'll need help," James decided. "People we can trust, with resources we don't have." Sarah thought immediately of Captain Rivera, who had helped them secure Ghost's adoption and demonstrated both understanding and discretion. "I have someone in mind. Let me make a call." Within 48 hours, a remarkable network began to form. Captain Rivera, now working with a specialized FBI unit focused on bioethics violations, provided official support and protection. Dr. Torres, who had left the Pineville Zoo to focus on her private practice, offered medical expertise for any animals they might find. Even Dr. Martinez, seeking redemption for his role in Blackwood's operation, volunteered his services. The Anderson home became an impromptu command center as they coordinated efforts to locate and secure the remaining animals from Project Sentinel. Ghost and Star, with their ability to sense their counterparts across considerable distances, served as living tracking systems, far more effective than any technology the researchers might employ. Through it all, Ethan remained at the center, the essential translator between the human and canine worlds, conveying vital information with a clarity and precision that belied his young age. His connection with Ghost had only strengthened, evolving into a partnership of equals despite the obvious differences in their ages and species. 3 months into this unexpected mission, they had successfully located 5 more genetically enhanced animals: the golden retriever from the children's hospital, a chocolate Labrador serving as a search and rescue dog in the mountains, a German short-haired pointer working with wildlife researchers, a beagle in a nursing home, and a mixed-breed therapy dog in a veterans program. Each animal had found purpose in service to humans, instinctively using their unique abilities to help those in need. With Rivera's assistance, they established protection protocols for each animal and their human companions, ensuring they could continue their valuable work while remaining shielded from those who would exploit them. The dogs learned to mask their psychic signatures, and their humans learned to recognize and respond to the subtle communications they had previously dismissed as coincidence or extraordinary training. On a crisp winter evening, as snow fell softly outside, the Anderson family gathered in their living room. Ghost lay on the hearthrug, Emma beside him reading a book, her hand absently stroking his fur. James and Sarah sat on the couch, reviewing information about a possible new sentinel animal in Canada. And Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing detailed pictures of the various dogs they had helped, his face serene with the satisfaction of meaningful work. "Ghost wants me to tell everyone something," Ethan announced suddenly, looking up from his drawing. All eyes turned to him expectantly. "He says thank you, not just for saving him, but for helping him find his purpose." "What is his purpose?" Emma asked, setting her book aside. Ethan smiled, his hand coming to rest on Ghost's head. "To build bridges," he replied, "between his kind and ours. To show humans that animals have thoughts and feelings and wisdom that we've been missing. Ghost says that's why the scientists made them special. They wanted weapons or tools, but they accidentally made teachers instead." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at the profound simplicity of this statement. In their months of working with the sentinel animals, she had indeed come to see them not as experimental subjects or even extraordinary pets, but as beings with unique perspectives and insights. Teachers, just as Ethan had said. Ghost rose and moved to the center of the room, his silver-gray coat gleaming in the firelight, his amber eyes reflecting a depth of intelligence that no longer seemed strange to any of them. And then, in a moment that would forever remain etched in their memories, something remarkable happened. A feeling washed over everyone present, a wave of gratitude, love, and belonging so intense that it brought gasps from the humans. With it came an image, crystal clear in all their minds. The family together, surrounded by a golden light, connected by shimmering threads that extended outward to the other sentinel animals and their humans, forming a vast, intricate web of consciousness. "He's talking to all of us," Emma whispered in awe. "I can hear him." James nodded, speechless, his hand finding Sarah's and squeezing tightly. For the first time, they were all experiencing what Ethan had known from the beginning, the direct communion with Ghost's mind, unfiltered by translation. "This is what he's been working toward," Ethan explained, his face alight with joy. "Ghost says as more people learn to listen, more animals will be heard. Not just the special ones like him, but all animals. They've been talking to us all along. We just forgot how to hear them." As the mental connection gently faded, leaving behind a lingering warmth and sense of profound connection, Sarah realized that their journey had never been merely about rescuing a dog from an abusive situation. It had been about something far larger, the restoration of an ancient bond between species, a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding rather than dominance and utility. Ghost returned to his place by the fire, settling down with the contented sigh of one who has completed an important task. The remarkable silver-gray shepherd, once caged and mislabeled, had not only found his way to freedom, but had opened a door that generations of humans had forgotten existed. And Ethan, the small boy who had heard a voice no one else could hear, who had insisted on following his heart despite adult skepticism, sat beside his beloved companion with the quiet satisfaction of a promise kept. "You see?" he whispered to Ghost, though words were no longer strictly necessary between them. "I told you we'd find each other, and now we'll never be alone again." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. Inside, a family had been transformed by the extraordinary love of a very special dog, a love that had transcended cages, distance, and even the barriers between species to remind humanity of what it had long forgotten, that the most powerful connections often come from the most unexpected places. What began as the rescue of a dog in a zoo had blossomed into something far greater, a mission to protect the extraordinary, a journey of discovery, and most importantly, a reminder that when we truly open our hearts and minds, we discover that we are never truly alone in this vast universe. Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you have a special bond with your pet, tell us about it. Maybe your animal companion has been trying to tell you something all along,